It starts with a line, "Why did you betray me?" The scene shows an image of a group of people and a man saying, "Kid, you've been hiding for so long, but I finally found your home." There is no civilized society in this post-apocalyptic world, and in this chaotic world, the law of the jungle rules. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. Another character, who looks like Toga from Boku no Hero, says, "Well, I'm a weak woman and I can only trust the strongest, so excuse me." Then a man picks up an iron bar and the protagonist asks, "What are you going to do to me?" In the next scene, we only see blood gushing across the screen. The scene changes to a statue buried in ice, saying, "Ice Age, 28 weeks before." Human nature is also frozen in that world. We see that the world was already completely frozen. A man appears walking on the snow and, in an alleyway completely filled with snow and water, our protagonist appears. He says, "It looks like this place hasn't been explored yet. Food and fuel, which were once easy to obtain, have become extremely precious." The protagonist comments, "Easy food and fuel? It's not easy here. I don't know what country he lives in, but I do know that the government here is worse than this apocalypse. Fuck everyone." As he walked along, he observed, "The ice here is thin enough. It should be safe." Suddenly, everything starts to shake. The protagonist says, "It was an earthquake." This frozen world is like God telling us that human civilization is as fragile as ice, vulnerable to even the slightest blow. The ice gives way, a crater forms, and the protagonist falls into it. Desperate, he uses his pickaxe to hold onto the wall of ice, praying, "For God's sake, don't break it." Even though he manages to hold on, he continues his rapid descent. Unfortunately, he falls, but luckily for him, on fluffy snow. He comments, "It's a good thing there was snow down here. If it had been ice, I would have turned into a ham by now." The protagonist reflects, as the saying goes, escaping a great disaster is more alarming in this frozen world. Suddenly, a hideous creature appears in front of him, called a white skin, known as a human devourer. The protagonist says, "Am I lucky? My luck is worthless." He starts running desperately, and the noise they make causes an ice pillar to fall on the monster's head, killing him. The protagonist comments, "Because of all that noise, the stalactites fell, saving my life." Looking up, he sees part of the building collapsing. Snow begins to cover his body, and he says, "I'm not going to be buried alive here." Completely covered in snow, only his arm remains outside. A spectral creature, resembling a slug, approaches his arm. Suddenly, the protagonist's eye glazes over, and he asks himself, "What happened? Why am I daydreaming at such a critical moment?" The protagonist realizes that the creature has entered his body, but decides to let it go. He says, "Forget it, I've been away long enough, I better get back home. At least today I won't come back empty-handed." When he sees a chocolate bar in the snow, the scene changes and the protagonist is standing in front of a huge building. He opens the lid of a manhole and comments, "Since most of the city is frozen, the only way home is through this passage. I have to do this day after day. I don't know how long this life will last." Compared to the outside, the situation in the building is just as bad. As he descends the passageway, he comes to a camp. When the disaster struck, many people were trapped in these buildings, and now, with supplies running low, it's hard to imagine what they will do to survive. The protagonist arrives in front of a door marked with the number 09. The woman who apparently betrayed him at the beginning of the story opens the door and hugs him. He comments, "You opened the door so quickly. Don't tell me you didn't lock it." She replies, "I just wanted to see you as soon as possible. Don't you want to see me too?" He replies, embarrassed, "Yes, I want to, but you also have to lock the door carefully." She says, "Is locking the door more important than seeing me?" The protagonist then shows her the chocolate. "Look what I brought you." Surprised, she asks, "What's this?" He replies, "It's chocolate." Happy, she gives him a kiss on the cheek and says, "Darling, you're the best of all." She then comments, "You only brought one chocolate?" The protagonist replies, "Just one, and I almost got killed by monsters because of it, so hurry up as fast as you can." She, with a serious face, says, "Wow, you're really abused, aren't you?" Facing the fireplace, the protagonist was a little depressed, saying, "Well, what should I do now? It's been several days since I found decent food in this world, and we'll probably have to eat the seeds I collected tonight." The situation situation with the seeds we planted earlier is not very optimistic, and if we eat these seeds, there will be no hope in the end. If we carry on like this, we'll all go mad. If the flesh of these monsters wasn't so poisonous, the people in the building wouldn't have to endure hunger. The protagonist then drops a piece of meat into the fire, which turns blue. He comments, well, on the bright side, at least the fat from these monsters is good fuel, and in this frozen world, at least we won't freeze to death. Wait, is today Valentine's Day? I really forgot about that. He then says, Xiaoming, I'm sorry, but I forgot that today was Xiaoming. Where did Xiaoming end up? The protagonist hears noises coming from behind the door and thinks, well, that's Xiaoming's signal. But why did she go outside? What is Xiaoming doing there? When he opens the door, the protagonist is hit in the face with a baseball bat and thrown away. A man says, Merry Christmas, brother. For you, is this a surprise or something unexpected? We see Xiaoming hugging the man, just like at the beginning of the story. The protagonist, confused and betrayed, asks, Xiaoming, why did you betray me? Why did you follow Luo Delong straight away? She completely changes her personality and replies, how dare you ask me that? Do you really think you can fool me with a piece of chocolate? Do you think I don't know that you've been hiding the food all this time? When the protagonist tries to speak, she interrupts, with such a big bag, you only brought air. You even lied to your girlfriend. You're no longer human. The man then crouches down in front of the protagonist and says, brother, as a fellow, I really feel bad for you. So let me give you a warning. There is no civilized society in a post-apocalyptic world. It's the law of the jungle that prevails. Do you understand that? You can't even support your own wife. What woman would be begging to follow you? Fracks have two choices. Depend on the strong or be preyed upon by the weak. The protagonist replies, where do I get some kind of food? The man, already preparing to give him another beating, says, it seems that you refuse to depend on the strong, so you can only be preyed upon by the weak. The protagonist says, okay, calm down. What are you going to do? He then breaks the protagonist's leg with one blow and knocks out a tooth with another blow to the head, also breaking his arm. Everyone starts beating the protagonist, leaving him completely broken and disfigured on the ground. Another man comments, boss, we searched the whole house and only found rotten corn. The blonde man replies, fracoats are meat too, aren't they? So we don't choose food. Give me my knife now. The man was ready to chop the protagonist, and he thought, in the end, it came to the end that I least wanted in my life. If there is another life, I want to live and survive it all. Suddenly, the protagonist wakes up in the middle of an office, desperate and frightened, calling Luo Dalong's name. He asks himself, hey, what just happened here? Didn't I just die? Why am I totally unharmed in this place? The protagonist was taken back to 28 hours before the Ice Age. It says, the protests in Queens are still going on. The city's police department has been dispatched on a large scale to maintain order. Manhattan's elites are enjoying an exclusive party. Brooklyn gangs are conducting transactions on the dirtiest streets in the world. The whole city is unaware of what is about to happen, except for one person. The protagonist walks confused down the street and, looking up at the sky, sees all the people contemplating the northern lights and taking photos. He comments, the aurora? That's the sign of the Ice Age. He can only remember Xiaoming's words, I'm a weak woman and I can only trust the strongest. He thinks, I really was blinded by her appearance for her to do such a thing to me, but now it's time to end it all. He answers Xiaoming's call and she says, love, are you still working overtime? Have you seen the dawn? It's very beautiful. The protagonist, disgusted, replies, let's finish and don't ever call me again. Xiaoming, surprised, asks, what's wrong with you? Why have you suddenly? He hangs up on her and deletes her contact, saying, since there's a second chance in my life, women like you who have hurt me will freeze to death in the Ice Age to come. Returning to the Brooklyn district, the protagonist reflects, with the second chance, this time I'll have to prepare myself very well. In my past life, or rather in my past cycle, within 24 hours before the Ice Age, the temperature will gradually drop to freezing point. From now on, I have less than 28 hours before the world freezes. It seems like a long time, but as the temperature drops, people will understand the problem. Society, which is already unstable, will become even more chaotic. So the time left for me to collect supplies is exactly 1 hour. The protagonist is incredulous, only 1 hour left, and he says, as well as ordinary supplements, in the initial chaotic environment we also need something to protect us, like weapons. The scene changes and our protagonist is in the middle of the street, very late at night, when a police car pulls up behind him. One policeman comments, this guy is very suspicious, walking the streets late. The other replies, follow him then, I'll show you a few tricks. Suddenly, the older policeman says, "Hey you, stop, don't move until I tell you to." The two policemen point their guns at the protagonist, saying, "Hands up now." The blonde policeman, in shock, says, "Robbery suspect found on 4th Avenue. The protagonist thinks, "Damn, this neighborhood has been hectic lately. They've mistaken me for a burglar." The older policeman asks, "What do you have in your hands?" The protagonist replies, "Well, sir, I only have a cell phone." He thinks, "I don't have time to waste with these two policemen. Hopefully, they'll let me go after an inspection." The other policeman warns, "Newbie, remember, don't approach anyone recklessly, understand?" The young policeman asks, "What have you got in your bag? Take it out now." The protagonist takes off his bag and says, "Well, I'm just a worker." When he goes to open the bag, the other policeman is shocked, thinking it's a gun. Recklessly, he advances towards the protagonist. The protagonist thinks, "A second chance? I had a second chance to go on living and it's gonna end like this? No, I want to live. It can't end like this." His eyes start to shine and blue veins appear on his face. From the policeman's perspective, the protagonist is enveloped in a blue aura. They ask themselves, "What's going on?" The ammunition, I can see them clearly. Is time slowing down? I can dodge it. It looks like it's not just an illusion. Calmly, the protagonist dodges the shot. He thinks, "Idiot, I'm a taxpayer too, and you have the nerve to shoot me? I don't have time to waste on a stupid person like you." The protagonist moves quickly towards the policeman and punches him hard, breaking his jaw. In another frame, we see the policeman's teeth flying and his eye almost coming out of its socket. The other policeman, in shock, sees his partner thrown hard against the wall, looking like a totally deformed rubber doll. The older policeman falls to the ground in despair, asking, "What are you? How did you do that? Who are you?" The protagonist, with a very imposing design, answers confidently. The policeman says, "Official command lowered, suspect escaped, officer's weapon lost. Repeat, suspect escaped, officer's weapon lost." He concludes, "Really, today was unbelievable." The protagonist runs out at high speed and arrives at his apartment. Sitting on the floor, he can't understand what has happened, asking himself, "Was that real? How could I do such a thing? Should I try again?" He pulls out his gun and fires it at the mirror. At high speed, he activates his power again and manages to catch the ammunition before it touches the mirror. He says, "I got it. I really did. As I thought, I've gained superpowers. There's no sign of an ice seal. So why is there ice all over my body? It could be high-speed movement like a supersonic airplane. It seems that this superpower is related to speed. Although it's a special ability, I predicted the day of the apocalypse. This ability could allow me to be one step ahead." Suddenly, someone knocks on the protagonist's door. He says, "Who's visiting me so late?" When he opens the door, he finds the landlady. She asks, "Was that the sound of gunfire?" The protagonist replies, "It was the sound of the TV. The TV remote control is a bit broken. Sorry." The gun was on the table, but the landlady didn't see it. He comments, "The grocery store nearby was robbed. The security isn't very good, but everything's fine, right?" The landlady replies, "Thank you for your advice, Mrs. Fong. You're very kind." She says, "You young people need to take care of your health. Don't work too much overtime." He closes the door and thinks, "Okay, now back to the point. How am I going to solve the problem of supplements? Wait, she mentioned that the grocery store nearby has everything." The protagonist smiles mischievously and says, "Time to stock up." He arrives at the grocery store, looking at things while the camera films him. In a split second, he disappears. The clerk, drowsy, doesn't even notice. She just notices that the machine is printing notes endlessly and wonders, "What happened? Someone bought something, but I didn't see anything." She finds a written note, "Sorry, don't be frightened. Go home and be safe." She thinks, "What a strange message. First a mugging, now this." Suddenly, two men come in with guns and point them at the attendant. She thinks, "I'm unlucky these days. It's another robbery." The men call her a bitch and quickly hand over the money. Across the street, a hideous creature appears, with white legs and mouths. The robber asks, "Why is it getting so cold all of a sudden?" The henchman says, "Look at the door." A creature full of eyes and mouths enters the shop. The robber says, "What kind of monster is that?" The henchman starts shooting, but the creature doesn't die. The monster grabs one of the robbers by the green hair and rips the skin off his face. The monster says, "That tastes horrible." The frightened girl tries to take a picture of the creature devouring the man. The policemen watch everything and one of them comments, "Is that a live stream that young people like?" The other replies, "It's been popular recently. What you're watching is a short video." what's happening is the end of the program. The policeman says, doesn't it look like an emergency message from the government? The other replies, it looks like something has happened. It says, this is the Homeless Security and Logistics Department. The protagonist says, it's starting. The city is experiencing a cold wave for unexplained reasons. Citizens, close your doors and windows, keep warm and don't leave the house. Finally, the Ice Age apocalypse is beginning. It is said, the cold wave is coming. The first to suffer is Brooklyn. In an hour, we have information about Building 58 in the new district communal apartments. Citizens, pay attention. This is the Department of Homeland Security and Logistics. A man looking at his computer says, what would the Department of Homeland Security and Logistics do? It must be something really serious. The other replies, it can't be that big a deal. The weather has been strange lately. It says, citizens, please don't panic because of the intense cold wave. Close your doors and windows, stay inside your homes, and try to keep warm. The protagonist was then determined to set up a very safe shelter and said, this time there won't be any mishaps. The scene changes to the man who killed our protagonist. He and his henchmen were beating a man on the ground. The man says, so you're not going to say anything about it? The bound and desperate man, his face bleeding, replies, I really don't know. The attacker then shows a photo of him next to a naked woman and says, then what is this? How dare you drug the boss's daughter? The bound man replies, I didn't really know at the time. The attacker replied, forget it. Someone like you must pray a lot for God to have mercy. He then takes a knife and pulls out one of the man's fingernails, ending up stabbing him to death. The attacker counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? No mistakes. He was collecting fingers. One of the henchmen asks, Brother Lou, what are we going to do with this guy? Lou replies, the sin of lust is death by fire. This rotten apartment has a cauldron, so throw this pig into it. The henchmen throw the body into the cauldron, and one of them comments, that boiler looks pretty old. Do you think it'll explode if we put the body in it? The other replies, stop talking shit. Brother Lou is still waiting. But the first henchman notices something wrong. The boiler explodes. The henchman, startled, says, that's not it. There was a gigantic shadow in front of those guys. The scene shifts to our protagonist, who comments, phew, a plant structure finally completed. With the current supplements, even if I don't go anywhere, I can hold out for quite a while. But it's still not enough. Supplements will eventually run out, and sustainable self-sufficiency is the key. My plan is to make a perfect survival room that is self-sufficient. The freezing phenomenon had been going on for almost an hour, so the protagonist decided to hurry. Suddenly, someone starts knocking on the door, and he thinks, I wonder who's knocking on my door at this hour? As he opens the door, he feels a familiar sensation, but this time it's not the bullies, it's the police. A policeman says, Mr. M.O., sorry to bother you. The protagonist thinks, security guards? What's going on here? He asks, what's the matter, old Joe? Joe replies, the broadcast just said that the outside temperature has suddenly dropped, but the heating is broken. The protagonist thinks, did the heating break? The policeman continues, until people don't notice at night, so we've come to warn everyone to be safe. The protagonist recalls, something similar happened last week. The heating malfunctioned and wasn't fixed in time. When I went to fix it, it was just a mess. I can't repeat the same mistake again. It needs to be fixed now. He then says, can you take me to have a look? Maybe I can fix it. The policeman replies, that would be great, and leads the protagonist to the stairs. Mr. M.O., where are you going? The protagonist replies, I'm going to the boiler room. Isn't that the direction? The policeman says, the apartment's boiler room is down in the basement. We need to go this way. The protagonist thinks, wait, I remember that the boiler room in the apartment is illegal. Miss Fong mentioned that. Could it be that I'm developing Alzheimer's earlier than usual? The scene changes and everyone arrives on the scene. The policeman comments, the basement is too cold. The protagonist thinks, that's strange smoke. What is it? It looks like cold air. Looking at the boiler, he says, that should be fine now. However, when he touches the boiler, he notices something wrong. Suddenly, behind one of the guards, was this huge creature. The guard asks, any more problems? The creature slaps the policeman on the ear, blowing his head off. The creature says, fingers, they're growing back, as it devours the policeman's body. The protagonist thinks, how can it be white skin? The remaining policeman desperately wonders what is going on. The creature prepares to attack, but the protagonist activates his power and, for a split second, manages to save the policeman's head. He thinks, that was too close. Old Joe nearly lost his head. The door is still open, perfect. If I run at top speed, I might be able to escape. However, the creature was on his tail. Frightened, he says, why can it keep up with my speed? There won't be time. The protagonist thinks, maybe it's because I'm carrying old Joe. That's why my speed isn't fast enough. Well, sorry, old Joe, but I'm going to have to throw you. He throws Joe out and tells him to get out of there. Joe, without understanding anything, sees the creature destroying everything and approaching the protagonist. He thinks, I need to understand this whole situation. First, when I was holding Joe, the white skin was able to reach me. Now, without Joe, my speed is greater. There may be some condition to the limit of my ability. The creature prepares to attack, but the protagonist easily dodges. And the protagonist says, well, what can be confirmed is that this condition has nothing to do with white skin. So it must be related to old Joey, right? When I played old Joey, a strange phenomenon happened. A similar energy ended up appearing in him when my ability was activated. I wonder if there's any connection between them. Xiaomo is then thinking, space pebbles, I think I understand. In the past life, humans faced white skin with no chance of survival. So when I see a white skin, I really only think about running away. The funny thing is that this white skin looks more like a peddler than anything else, right? If you know what I mean. But to change the subject, protagonist thinks, but now it's different. As long as my assumption is correct, someone who was once prey can also become a hunter. Xiaomo then picks up a stone from the ground and begins to throw it. He concentrates and ends up throwing the stone with the greatest speed in the world, disintegrating that monster. And the protagonist says, well, as I thought, my assumption was correct. My ability can only affect targets contaminated by energy. And as long as they are contaminated by energy, I can accelerate them. With acceleration, the kinetic energy of the objects will increase greatly, and even a pebble accelerated to a certain point has the power of an electromagnetic cannon. Suddenly, that blue liquid starts to drip. When the scene changes, we see that it was actually dripping from both the protagonist's eyes and his nose. And he says, well, that's blue blood. What the fuck is happening to my body? The protagonist then ends up falling to his knees and vomiting this blue blood. By the time he spat out all the blue blood, he's lying on the floor saying, man, it's really cold now. Mr. Lin, old Joey. Just like that, our Xiaomo was starting to lose consciousness while Joey was trying to wake him up. And in the background, the protagonist could only hear, Mr. Lin, please wake up, don't sleep. When the protagonist opened his eyes again, he was in a completely different place, with Joey saying, how's the situation outside? And the woman replies, the wind is very strong. We won't be able to get to the hospital that way. And it's said that the main gate is frozen, unable to withstand the blizzard. And the protagonist can only think, frozen, and Joey starts shouting, then let's find something to block the wind first, otherwise we'll freeze to death. Go to the security room and turn on the heating now. And the woman says, well, it looks like he's been poisoned. I wonder what happened in the basement. The voices just said, hold on a little longer, please, don't sleep. You saved my life, so I need to thank you in a proper way, my friend. Mrs. Fong then appears and says, stop talking and go upstairs to find Joe. Suddenly, a man arrives and says, excuse me, and it said, we're almost there, just hold on a little longer, Dr. Joe. And a person who doesn't show his face says, just leave him here. And Joey says, Mr. Lin, are you really going to be all right? And the person says, I felt it. You'd better go and look at the stairs. Everything's a mess. Well, he really is still alive, even with his body temperature that low. Are you one of those cryogenic people? Then it says, record 409. Male patient, 20 to 25 years old, has symptoms suspicious of poisoning and he is still in a coma. And his vital signs should be considered abnormal. His body temperature is around 10 degrees, but his pulse and nerve reflexes show no abnormality, and that, for me, is unprecedented. The blood separation has been completed. Let's take a look at the results. The woman then looked at the results and said, interesting. I've never seen anything like that before. The appearance of the blood before centrifuging is no different from normal blood. But after centrifuging, blue impurities were separated from the blood. The analysis of the blood sample will take some time. Continue observing the patient's superficial characteristics. If you don't look closely, you could mistake it for a vein. But if you look closely, it's like some kind of allergic reaction. Suddenly, our protagonist opens his eyes and the woman says, oh, so you're awake, are you? The protagonist then becomes very confused and wonders what was happening to him there. And she says, I suggest you don't walk around like a silly cockroach now. Xiaomo, all naked, says, hey, who are you? And the doctor, all drippy, smoking a cigarette, all stylish, says, Me? Hey, I'm an unlicensed doctor and, for some reasons, I can't reveal my name, you know? But you can call me Dr. Zhou. Now, let me see how you ended up like this. The protagonist is thinking, what do you mean? She then gets very close to the protagonist, blows smoke in his face and says, to be honest, I've never seen symptoms like yours before, so tell me what happened in that cellar. Now I'm very interested in you. In fact, I'm extremely interested in you, boy. The protagonist is lucky, huh? Considering that she saw the protagonist totally naked in the freezing cold, and she's still interested in him. So, boy, is the protagonist potent, huh? The temperature shows that Brooklyn was minus 29 degrees Celsius, and the world record for the lowest body temperature is 13.7 degrees Celsius. This is the lowest temperature ever recorded. Although theoretically the human body can tolerate up to 0 degrees Celsius, when it reaches that temperature, the body's tissues freeze and the body cells are destroyed. But in fact, temperatures below 32 degrees Celsius can cause joint tremors and death. This is called hypothermia. Humans cannot survive in an environment below minus 29 degrees Celsius, and it is even more impossible to survive at a body temperature below 13.7 degrees Celsius. Kid, I only know one thing. I'm learning more from this work than from school. Boy, come on, bro. Just reading this makes my brain, frying. Dr. Zhou was taking the protagonist's temperature with a thermometer in his mouth. She then says, right, you can let go now. Well, take a look at your current temperature. And the protagonist's temperature was 11.5 degrees Celsius. The doctor, impressed, said, well, that's a miracle you're still alive. Xiaomo, seeing this, said, 11.5 degrees Celsius? How is that possible? He wonders if it was really because of his ability. Xiaomo then thinks, well, I don't have time to think about it now. I have to complete the plan as quickly as possible. Dr. Zhou was looking at some things and said, well, I see. As the protagonist tries to get up, he slips and hits his head on the stretcher, and she says, well, I'm sure I told you not to move, didn't I? Your body is very weak right now. The doctor, Dr. Zhou, then says, well, I've discovered something about you. Could it be that you have a superpower? The protagonist is thinking, well, how does she know that? He thought he didn't have time to waste with that doctor in that place and started smiling, saying, well, what kind of stupid joke is that? And she replied, don't underestimate a doctor's powers of observation. I was in the second basement. The protagonist thinks, as long as I have the skill active, even if I have to climb all over again, it will still be very quick. And again, the protagonist starts spitting out that blue blood. The doctor then asks if he's okay, and the protagonist wonders what was really going on with his body. He says he can't speed up anymore and wonders why this is happening right now. And, according to his past life experiences, what's about to happen is, but just as he was about to speak, a man came in and said, after a meeting with Dr. Zhou, you two need to behave a little more. They were talking behind the door of the room where Dr. Zhou and the protagonist were. Dr. Zhou then gets very angry and tells them to leave. She holds out her hand to the protagonist and tells him to get up quickly. The protagonist then wonders what the problem was outside, and she asks him to lie down. The protagonist then asks, well, why am I doing this out of the blue? And she says, well, no questions, just lie down now. So listen well, if you want to survive, do as I say and wait here. Close your eyes and don't move for anything. Do you understand? So, Dr. Zhou ends up opening the door, and that crazy guy who killed the protagonist ends up walking in. He says, sorry to bother you. Dr. Zhou then asks him what he wants, and he says, if it's all right, could I come in and talk to you for a while? And she says, well, whatever you want. As soon as he enters, she asks what happened, and he says, I heard that the resident of 409 is receiving treatment at this place, so I have something to ask him. The protagonist, with his eyes closed, thinks, wait a minute, that voice, I know that voice. And she says, well, unfortunately, the person you're looking for died of poisoning. The man then smiles and says, well, that's a shame. The protagonist recognizes that it was Luo and thinks, well, he wasn't completely frozen before he showed up here last week. The time before, damn, why now? If I can use my acceleration ability now, I could even kill this guy. Luo says, Dr. Zhou, you've worked hard all this time, haven't you? Are you sure this person really died? I think I just saw him blinking his eyes. What do you think about me helping you check again? He then says, what do you mean? I'm already saying he's dead. He then takes out a giant pair of pliers and says, what if it's just a fake death? Just as he's about to pierce the protagonist, Dr. Zhou slaps him in the face and says, are you questioning my abilities, Luo? And his henchmen all get angry, saying how dare she hit him. But Luo says, wait a minute, sorry about that, Dr. Zhou, forgive my rudeness. You saved so many of our brothers on the street. how could I ever repay you? It was my fault, so I ask you not to be angry with me. But I also hope you won't forget who's looking after you and your dirty, miserable clinic. So please give me an answer to that as soon as possible. Just think about it. He turns and walks away while she tells him it was all nonsense. As soon as they leave, the protagonist gets up and she says, well, they've gone and I think you have a lot of questions to ask, don't you? The protagonist thinks, exactly, Luo last week at least had a reason to kill me. But why on earth does Luo now want to kill me as soon as he sees me? And why does this woman want to protect me? But first of all, the protagonist ends up saying, well, Dr. Zhou, but where are my clothes? And she says, wow, is that really going to be your first question? The scene then changes to show Brooklyn at -40°C. Some men were talking, honestly, when I was younger, I looked at my father tending the furnace and felt that I couldn't be a loser like him for the rest of my life. But now I see that my father was a great man. The other replies, hey, calm down. It's just the super messy weather outside. The temperature will return to normal. There's no need to feel sorry for your daddy. Luo then says, do you really think everything will get better in a few days? Government messages used to be broadcast every 20 minutes. Now even the internet has stopped. It's as if the government has given up. And this repeated cold snap must be God's punishment for humanity. Suddenly, old Joey was tied up in the gears and he said, God doesn't punish sinners like you. Luo replies, well, I'm just managing this apartment. Don't you think the order I've created is harmonious? And Joey retorts, in your order, you force everyone to go out and get supplies to provide for you. If they don't, you cut off their heat, right? Luo replies, isn't that nice? I give everyone heat and they give me something in return. The order is fair. It's the principle of equivalent exchange. Joey then starts shouting, calling Luo a parasite. And Luo says, oh, that's too bad. The tenant of the 409 seems to have already died. Otherwise, there would be one more person to reap the benefits of the order I bring. Joey, desperate, asks, the 409? Mr. Lin is dead, and he is shocked by the news. Back in Dr. Zhou's office, she says, are you dressed yet? Well, then we'll finish up here and you can come back when you're done. The protagonist then says, well, you'll have to wait a while. He thinks, shit, even getting dressed is such a problem. He asks, well, tell me, what is it? And she replies, do you know how long you were unconscious? The protagonist replies, I don't know, about 6 hours. And she very dryly says, no, it was 6 days. When he looked at the date, he realized that it was already July 21st. He then says, a lot has happened in the last 6 days. Luo now controls the entire heating system in the apartment. He wants the residents to exchange supplies for the use of the heating, or he'll cut off their heating. Many residents have been forced to go outside to get supplies, and going outside now is almost like committing suicide. Those who left probably thought they were going to die anyway. The protagonist is then disgusted by the whole situation and thinks, no matter where I am, he really is a beast. He asks Dr. Zhou, is there any way to get my body back? She looks at him and starts to smile. Of course, but if you want me to tell you something, there's one condition. After all, I run an underground clinic and I don't do charity work. What do you think? Will you accept? The protagonist then says, okay, but what's your condition? As long as I can do it, maybe I'll accept. She replies, very good indeed. I want you to be my research subject and allow me to study your body. But don't worry, my research won't put your life at risk. And as I said, I'm very interested in you. The protagonist just smiles and says it's all done. She continues, there's a special substance in your blood, but I haven't fully figured out what it is. What is certain is that this substance absorbs thermal radiation. They help convert thermal energy into usable energy for your body, and this phenomenon only occurs when there is a lack of heat. However, before absorbing a certain amount, your body becomes cold. To put it simply, your body suddenly has a way of storing energy, and your current state of weakness is just hunger. The protagonist then says, well, then I just need to eat and everything will be fine? And she replies, exactly, but the amount needed is going to be quite large, and I don't have all this food here. The protagonist says, don't worry about it, I'll manage. So the protagonist starts down the stairs and thinks, it's a good thing I prepared in advance and went to the supermarket to do some shopping. Now, as long as I get home safely, that would be a win. He then opens the door to his room, which was completely frozen over, and thinks, damn, those bastards have cut the heating to my room. That could really freeze me to death. That bastard Luo, my whole room has turned into an igloo. The protagonist walks around the room and says, I found the food with the most calories, which were a bunch of chocolate bars. He picks one up and says, bad memories are starting to come back. I really need to change this brand next time I buy chocolate. He starts eating the chocolate bars and says, no reaction. It seems that this amount really wasn't enough, so I need to increase the dose. So, the protagonist starts eating more and more chocolate and thinks, this feeling, it's like I have something inside my body that wants warmth. It's bad. I feel like I'm about to lose all control of my body. Suddenly, Luo's henchmen open the door to 409 and say, the boss was planning to cut off the big boy's fingers to try and open the door, and out of nowhere it opens by itself. One of the guys says, yeah, there really are a lot of supplies here. The protagonist now no longer looked blue-veined, but red-veined. And the guys ask, hey, who the insert insult here are you? Did you open that door? How did you manage to do that? The scene shifts to Dr. Zhou, and she thinks, the final report of the simulation is finally ready, right? So let's see what exactly is inside his body. The active state of reversal affects neural activity. This is really bad. If too much glycogen is replenished, he'll be a bit. Just as she was about to finish speaking, the scene cuts back to the protagonist with those two goons. One of the guys says, you little shit, no matter who you are, everything in this room belongs to us. Understand? The protagonist was already looking very imposing, just smiling at the guys. He just claps his two fists and says, all this power is pretty insane. 72 hours earlier, Zhou arrives in room 409 and bursts out, bro, what the fuck happened here? How did you turn room 409 into such chaos? She looks around and sees a piece of walking meat like a gourmet zombie. Curious, she picks it up and says, this is interesting, and puts it away. When Zhou looks up, she sees a camera. It looks like I'm going to have to jump into the security room to find out the truth, she says. Suddenly, a voice on the intercom, hello, hello to all residents. Please distribute your supplies rationally to avoid wastage. From now on, you all have to pay a small compensation for the heating. Meanwhile, the guy's henchmen were trying to carry old Josh. That old man's too heavy, poor old boiler, says one of them. The other replied, bro, enough talking. Remember what the boss said, keep an eye on the boiler. The locals, hearing this, say, this has got to be a bad joke. What's old Josh doing? The other man says, I don't think it's old Josh. Then he continues, just so you understand the seriousness of the situation, I'm going to turn off the heating for a while to save resources. And just like that, he turns off everyone's heating. Suddenly, the scene shifts to our protagonist, imprisoned and wearing prison clothes. Do you hate him? Someone asks. What? Who do I hate? Replies the protagonist. You hate Luo Delong. And then our prota's eyes fill with veins. He shouts, of course I hate that bastard. Protagonist grabs one of the henchmen by the neck and lifts him off the ground, hanging him. Red particles start to appear, and the guy's eyes glow red. Protagonist is looking at Luo Dalong instead. Luo Dalong says, did you know that human meat tastes like beef? But I don't eat beef. The protagonist, furious, throws the guy away so far that he falls down where other people were standing. People come up to the fallen guy and say, my God, what is that? The guy was just a skeleton, drier than a raisin. One of them comments, he must have fallen from the top floor. And the other thinks, what the fuck happened to make this body look like this? Who is this crazy guy? Is he some kind of alien? But this isn't even Area 51. Meanwhile, one of the henchmen is thinking, damn, I don't stand a chance against this guy. I'd better do everything I can. He grabs a gun and prepares to attack protagonist, who only sees Luo Delong saying, that's the law of the jungle. When the henchman tries to hit protagonist, he dodges with absurd speed and teases, come on, do your best. The henchman gets angry, but no attack hits. Protagonist can still see Luo Delong saying, you'd better not move, you good for nothing. Smiling, protagonist prepares to attack the madman. At high speed, with one hand, he breaks the guy in half, a total gore, guts flying everywhere. Suddenly, someone comes to the door calling Prota's name. Guess who it is? It's Xiaoming, Prota's ex-girlfriend, with a pistol pointed at him. She shoots a tranquilizer into Prota's abdomen. But, my friends, it wasn't Prota's ex-girlfriend, it was Dr. Zhou. Because of his power, protagonist was hallucinating and seeing his ex Zhou, trying to calm him down, says, relax, that's insulin, just to break down the excess heat in your body. And protagonist faints in Dr. Zhou's arms. Looking at all the crops in the room, she wonders what was really going on there. The scene changes to a dark environment. A voice narrates, hunger, a catalyst for human atrocities, cannibalism between relatives, wars. All this has happened in human history. With the development of technology and agriculture, society has gradually stabilized. But hunger has never disappeared. In a frozen world, farming is almost impossible. Humanity's dark history is about to repeat itself. However, there is always an exception. The scene returns turns to protagonist, who is lying unconscious in the plantations. Dr. Zhou comments, "You've just woken up, but now you need to sleep again. Sorry about that." She looks around, puzzled. What could all this be? The doctor picks up something that looks like a tomato, takes a bite and comments, interesting. The taste is surprising, not bad. And this amount of food here is enough to feed the whole building. Suddenly, the scene changes to a couple in the middle of heavy snow. The woman's stomach rumbles and the man asks if everything is all right. She replies, "Relax, no problem." He says, "Hang on, I think I remember a bar that has chocolate there." The woman replies, "There's no need, I'm not even hungry." The man then remembers that he had some chocolate in his jacket, but when he looks for it, he can't find it. "Shit, I thought it was in that jacket." The woman then remembers, "We gave it to our daughter this morning." He smiles, "Sorry, I forgot." But suddenly, a dark shadow approaches from behind the man. A giant hand rips off half his head, tongue and eyes popping out. The woman, face to face with the horrific scene, sees everything in HD, 4K, Dolby Vision. Suddenly, a gigantic creature appears that I'm going to call Zenilda. It grabs the man's corpse and starts devouring it with a mouth in a, shall we say, peculiar place. And guys, a lot of men die because of a Zenilda, huh? Be careful. The man, still alive, shouts at the woman, "Don't despair. Come this way if you want to survive." The woman starts to run while the out-of-control Zenilda runs after her. The creature makes a fist that catches the ice, throwing the woman forward. She falls face down on the ground, her face bleeding, just waiting to die. But the blonde man improvises a Molotov cocktail and attacks Zenilda, hitting her square in the face. The creature's arm quickly catches fire and she screams, "I hate the heat." The woman, her arm weakened, runs into a building, thinking that the creature has stopped following her. She arrives in front of an elevator and, desperate, starts pressing the button. But, of course, Zenilda was about to enter the building. Desperate, crying with fear, the woman frantically pressed the elevator button. Suddenly, the blonde man appeared again and said, "Please close your eyes now." Without understanding anything, the woman obeys. Several lights come on, and the monster shouts, "A bright light! I hate it! Turn it off!" The guy was standing there in the middle of the lights, making a rock and roll symbol. "This crazy guy is really crazy, huh?" I thought. Then he said, "This smells like teenage spirit to me." And I was like, wait a minute, was that a reference to Kurt Cobain? The guy sounded like himself, the Kurt Cobain of the ice apocalypse. Suddenly, he starts playing the guitar and the amplifiers make a deafening noise. The monster screamed in despair, hating everything. The scene changes to a cute little baby. "My name is Dorothy Perez. My childhood dream was to be a doctor and, after growing up, I got a degree in nursing. That's when I met a slightly clumsy guy called Matt. It was love at first sight and then we got married. Our darling little daughter Maggie was born and we moved into a new apartment. We've been through a lot. A frozen world, bandits taking over the building, monsters. What's happening now I can't explain. But seeing a man suppress a giant monster with a guitar is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen." The guy was still there, playing his guitar solo. Zenilda, irritated, prepared to attack. The guy, very calm, steps on a button on the floor and several iron bars fall on Zenilda, crushing the monster. Only her hand remains. The woman, horrified, asks if it's really over. Is it finally over? But then it hits her. She remembers that she lost her husband and starts to cry. The man holds out his hand to her. "Please don't cry. Everything's fine with you. My friends, the guy is a real stud." The scene changes to her standing in front of a fire in a bucket. She looks at the blood-stained family necklace. The Kurt Cobain of the apocalypse arrives and says, "Rest in peace, hero. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes. As well as fighting the dead, we need to protect the living." The woman thinks, what's this lunatic talking about? I've just lost my husband. He apologizes. Did I say something strange? Just as he was about to introduce himself, she says her name is Dorothy. And the guy says, "My name is Corbin." If that's not a reference to Kurt Cobain, I don't know what is. "Thanks for saving me," says Dorothy. He replies, "Relax, it was nothing." And in the background, I see a photo of Green Day's album. A bit blurry, but you can see Green Day written on it. There's nothing but great references here. Dorothy asks, "Are you going to look for more supplies?" Corbin says, "My situation is a little more complicated. Hang on, let me show you something." He takes a photo and shows it. "I came from Seattle looking for a friend, but I got caught in the cold wave. This is my friend, the one with the strange hat. We played in a band in high school." I thought, dude, so many rock references. He looks like the lead singer of Guns N' Roses, and his friend, Slash himself. When Dorothy looked at the photo, she said, "Wait a minute, that guy lives in 409. I was shocked. I can't believe that's the protagonist. Everyone has an emo phase in adolescence. Suddenly, everything starts to shake. Corbin asks, "What's going on?" He looks outside and sees a giant blizzard approaching. What are those? Monsters appeared that looked like they were straight out of Silent Hill, and among them a gigantic one like Pyramid Head, only female. They were heading towards the apartment. Just as all this was happening, the scene changes to our protagonist opening his eyes. And he had a good vision, you see. When he opened his eyes, he thought, "My God, how long has it been? And what is that in front of me? Is it a woman?" But he was actually looking straight at the girl's airbags. Embarrassed, he wondered what was going on. The woman, very calm, with the airbags practically in his face, says, "Oh good, you're awake. I've already put you in." And he, confused, "Put what in me?" Of course, the guy lying unconscious in a suspicious position. God knows what was going through his mind. The next thing he knows, he's strapped to a chair with various pieces of medical equipment on his body. The woman says, "Relax, it's no big deal, just a safety measure." The protagonist asks, "Security? What do you mean?" Then he realizes he's wearing a necklace. Zhou explains, necklaces are one of the oldest pieces of jewelry in the world. In the past, they symbolize slavery, but today they can be toys for adults. Zhou says, "Don't worry, there's nothing fetish about this necklace." Protagonist thinks, "I wouldn't even have thought about it if she hadn't mentioned it." Then he says, "Look, I agreed to be your research subject, not your doll." Zhou replies, "Exactly, you're a real research subject. That necklace you're wearing is a special monitoring tool. Remember I said that things in your body can help absorb and store heat? This necklace proves my hypothesis. When your blood sugar levels are high, it changes from blue to red." Protagonist, a little confused, "What are you talking about?" Zhou says, "It means the other state. Remember what happened 20 minutes ago?" Protagonist thinks but can't remember. Zhou touches his nose and says, "Relax, it's okay if you can't remember. I'm here to find out what's happening to your body. It's part of our research." Zhou turns and walks away. Protagonist thinks, "I always feel that this woman has a plan with me, but I don't want to know what's going on now. If I find out, I'll have an advantage." Zhou goes to a computer and presses a button. Suddenly, protagonist starts twitching. He sees that they are injecting him with 25% glucose. Startled, his body begins to turn very red. Zhou comments, "What a reaction. Let's record the data." Protagonist asks what she did to him, and Zhou says, "Oh, I almost forgot." At that moment, Zhou simply kneels down in front of protagonist. He turns even redder, wondering what she's going to do. Zhou lifts a potted plant and places it between his legs. Protagonist looks at the plant and his eyes begin to change shape. A red aura takes over the room. The protagonist shouts, "How dare you deceive me like that?" Suddenly, a version of protagonist appears. This is great fun. This clone uses its ability to get fast and gets very close to Prota's face. The plant grows, taking up almost the entire room. Protagonist asks, "What's happening to me?" The clone replies, "I'm glad we met again." Protagonist asks, "Wait, are you me? Am I hallucinating?" The clone says, "Relax, she can't hear you now." He looks at Zhou and sees that she is frozen in time. Protagonist asks if he's the one doing it, and the clone replies, "Sort of, but not exactly." Protagonist, still perplexed, asks, "What do you mean? Who are you really? And why do you look exactly like me?" The clone replies, "To be precise, it's the two of us together. On your own, you wouldn't have been able to reach this level. As for who I am, maybe this will help you remember." And, taking off his hood, he reveals a frightening appearance with 4 eyes and a blue aura. The clone then asks, "And now, have you managed to remember anything?" Protagonist remembers that little bug that got into his arm. The clone says, "Very good, you really did remember. Your powers and your ability to resurrect are thanks to me. So we're going to get along just fine, right, Limo?" Suddenly, the animal transforms into a completely naked woman. At that moment, the scene cuts to a presentation about the National Security and Logistics Agency, NSAL, one of the few institutions still functioning after the government collapse. Suddenly, a voice calls out to Pushun Lu. The scene changes to a photograph of Zhou, while a woman says, "The network hasn't been restored yet." Another woman replies, "Miss Barbara, you've asked this question 28 times in the last 2 days. The problem is hardware, and we haven't been able to contact the engineering department. You know the situation out there." Barbara, visibly frustrated, says, "Got it, and your report, is it ready yet?" The other woman replies, "Almost done." Barbara interrupts, "Send it to me first." The woman asks, "And the rest?" Barbara replies angrily, "That bucket won't read it. The situation is urgent." The scene changes to Barbara talking to a man who looks like a bowling ball. He says, "At the National Logistics Agency, now is not the time to discuss this. First came climate change, then cyber attacks. Our communication methods are useless, and our operatives have been out of contact for 48 hours. We're at war and we need to act immediately." Barbara kicks him and says, "Don't worry about your political superiority." The scene then shows the sample observation room in the laboratory of the National Agency for Logistics and Biochemical Defense. Barbara asks, "Now do you understand why I'm so anxious?" The man, startled, sees a hideous creature and asks, "What is that?" Barbara explains, "This was found near the bunker. This creature, which calls itself Concha, was human." The green-haired girl says, "We've noticed that these creatures have mutated from humans." The man, shocked, replies, "Humans? That's impossible." Barbara then points, "Look closer at her neck." He sees an identification collar and says, "This guy is from the Field Operations Department. What happened to him?" Barbara explains, "It probably happened before the network went down. He was Agent Silverhammer. 24 hours later, his body mutated into what you see now." The green-haired girl says, "We obtained information from the CIA before the network went down, confirming that this creature was monitored before the cold snap." Barbara shows a photograph of the supermarket. "These two are the first monsters we temporarily called Shell and Number Zero, referring to a photo of our protagonist." The scene shifts back to protagonist, who thinks, "What's going on? A second ago, this creature was a bug, and now it's turned into a beautiful girl." The monster, now in the form of a woman, looks at protagonist, noticing that he is shy. The creature, now sitting on our protagonist's lap, comments, "Ah, you humans, you all get shy when you see the opposite gender naked." All protagonist could think was, "My God, this has to be an illusion." The atmosphere seemed to stand still in time. The creature continued, "Well, you might think so. After all, we're kind of merged now, and you can hear what I'm thinking." Protagonist, even more confused, replies, "That's a strange explanation, don't you think?" The creature explains, "You can see me now because that woman injected me with enough sugar to activate my consciousness. The me you're seeing is just an illusion of your mind." Protagonist asks, "The doctor said that the substance inside me is you, and the other state means that you've been activated, right?" The creature confirms, "Narrowly speaking, that's basically it. My blood is what gives you your abilities." Protagonist asks, "Then why are you a parasite in my body?" The creature replies, "We're different from humans. We're not part of this dimension." The protagonist, even more perplexed, asks, "What do you mean you're not part of this dimension?" The creature explains, "We need to parasitize the bodies of natives from various dimensions to understand this dimension." Protagonist thinks, "That sounds like a cheesy soap opera scenario." The creature continues, "Our race has what you humans call names, but the concept of time has no meaning for us. For us, time is not linear. We are present in several dimensions from birth. We cannot interfere with the material of any dimension on our own. We can only parasitize intelligent beings from other dimensions to use their bodies and break down dimensional barriers." Protagonist replies, "That sounds like existentialism, but it sounds like you're a lonely person." The creature laughs and says, "Are you feeling sorry for me? That's empathy, right? Choosing humans as a shell was the right choice. Your expression is very beautiful to me, but I have bad news. From the moment we merged, you became Shell's target." The scene then changes to those creatures approaching the apartment. The giant creature comments that it smells food coming from there and that the enemy is there. Back to protagonist. He asks, "What do you mean by Shell?" The creature replies, "You'll find out soon enough, and if you need anything, remember to beat me. You know how to do that." Time goes back to normal. Without a minute's peace, half a head falls to the ground. A woman running from the creatures, which have managed to enter the building, bursts through the window and doors, causing a gigantic massacre. Some creatures chase a guy with gray hair, who runs into a blocked door and screams in despair. The creatures jump on his back, pierce him and break down the door. Inside were the two goons guarding old Josh. They wonder what kind of creatures they were. The creatures pierce the skulls of the two simultaneously, while Josh watches. He realizes that the creatures are absorbing the blood and have not yet noticed his presence. Josh thinks, I need to find a way to escape quickly. It's going to be hard to break these ropes without tools, and this pillar doesn't have anything sharp. He decides to use an old trick. He moves his finger and manages to get his hand through the rope. It's a good thing I have this old injury from my youth, he thinks. I need to get to the security room. There are several weapons there. Those idiot thieves didn't notice the guns in the cupboard. While he was thinking, one of the creatures turned towards him. Josh was startled, as he wouldn't have time to get to the cupboard. The scene returns to Dr. Zhou. She comments, well, as I thought, these plants responded to your influence and grew rapidly in a short time. The protagonist then asks, so can you undo this now or not? Zhou replies, although that's true, you can't use your ability for prolonged periods. Otherwise, you'll enter a weakened state. I've already collected the data I need. The protagonist insists, then help me undo it now. Suddenly, they hear a loud noise. Zhou and protagonist look up startled, trying to identify the source of the sound. They realize that the sound is coming from the door in front of them. They both become even more frightened, wondering what was going on. The protagonist thinks, it can't be. Could it be those creatures? While he was thinking, one of those quadruped creatures appeared at high speed. The protagonist, seeing the white skin, is shocked. It's not possible. They're here. The hallucination of the creature inside him comments, that's Concha. The protagonist turns and asks why she was still there, since he wasn't in that state. The creature tells him to keep quiet. Now is not the time for you to worry about that. If you don't do anything, this woman will surely be killed. Without hesitation, protagonist activates part of his power to help Zhou. He thinks, why are the women in my life so difficult? He picks Zhou up and speeds off. The creature ends up hitting its head on one of the machines. On landing, protagonist asks, are you all right, doctor? Zhou, impressed and shy, replies, yes, I'm fine. It was very interesting to experience your skill up close like this. Despite the moment, they know they can't talk for long, as the creature was already getting back together in the middle of the wreckage. Zhou asks, what was that creature? The protagonist explains, that's a white skin, a shell. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know it's very dangerous. Determinedly, protagonist says, Dr. Zhou, please let me kill this thing once and for all. Zhou, hesitant but confident, agrees. The protagonist prepares for the fight, knowing that he cannot fail. Dr. Zhou then says that, although he already knows this, she still wants to remind him not to abuse his abilities too much, as he was a bit weak. The MC replies, sure, leave it to me. But, by the way, I wanted to tell you something. Although your approach may seem a little clumsy, from the results, you've really helped me a lot. So thank you very much, Dr. Zhou. She smiles and asks if he would really talk about it now. The MC replies that they would deal with these little things later, and that for the moment he would make a point of helping her in another way. Suddenly, several white-skinned creatures start falling from the ceiling, and he wonders why there were so many of them and what was driving them to act so collectively. He thinks, dealing with one is easy, but with so many, I might become weak again. Dr. Zhou asks what was wrong, as she was anxious to see how he would thank her. The MC replies that she would probably have to wait a while, but the creatures already start attacking him without a second thought. He decides that he needs to weaken them and faces them hand to hand. Dr. Zhou comments that, in this case, she will see how far the MC's limits go. He thinks, if I keep using acceleration continuously, like in past experiences, I'll end up getting weak again before I beat them all. But there is a solution. I only need to use acceleration when necessary. He realizes that the creatures were attacking together and that, despite their appearances, they weren't as dumb as they looked. Determined, he declares that he will no longer be easy prey. The MC activates acceleration. Time slows down for him, allowing him to observe his enemies' movements and predict their attacks. This makes it easier to dodge even without using acceleration all the time. What's more, he realizes that, even unarmed, he can unleash a supersonic blast by accelerating his fists. He launches a powerful blow, destroying most of the white-skinned creatures with just one punch. He then mocks the remaining creatures, asking if they were afraid, as he was just getting started. Dr. Zhou comments that although his calorie consumption hasn't decreased, his efficiency in using his abilities has been optimized, and he consumed less than 10% energy in this attack, which was impressive. Zhou calls the MC a test object, and says that he could further exploit the move he has just used. The MC replies that he already knew she was monitoring the condition of his body, and that he wasn't surprised. Suddenly, more white-skinned creatures start attacking him. He launches another blow and, in the midst of the attack, thinks that Dr. Zoe was a bit of a charlatan. His body had 83% energy left. The doctor comments that he has mastered his abilities very well, but now she has a new question. You seem to know a lot about these things. Tell me everything you know, test subject. Suddenly, the scene changes to a bloodied man under the creatures. He wakes up and wonders what was going on and why there was so much blood. He realizes that when the creature attacked him, he managed to defend himself with an iron bar, killing it. He thinks that if it hadn't been for that, he would have been finished. Then his cell phone starts ringing, which impresses him, since the network is supposed to be down. When he answers it, he hears a voice. Good morning, Josh Castillo? Or should I call you Curved Blade? The scene returns to the MC, who tells Dr. Zoe that that's all he knows, but thinks that, of course, he wouldn't tell her that he's already died once and traveled back in time. Dr. Zoe, now wearing a different outfit, jokes that it's fan service for everyone. She asks for his help to zipper up her outfit. The MC is shy, but the doctor explains that it was an environmental protection suit, still a prototype from her old job, but that it had some problems. He asks why she suddenly changed her clothes. Zoe replies that she was taking a look at the ceiling when the creatures broke in through the ducts, possibly damaging the ventilation system. She asks if he hadn't noticed the drop in the room's temperature. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door. When they open it, it's just a child. Dr. Zoe wonders what a child is doing there, and the MC says he thought she was his neighbor. Seeing them, the child starts running, and the MC runs after her, asking her to wait. Zoe, annoyed, comments that this is exactly why she hates children. At the end of a bloody corridor, the child points to a place. When the two run after her, they realize that there are several dead people on the stairs. The MC tells the little girl that it was a very dangerous place, and she ends up pointing to Joseph, who was lying on the floor, completely covered in blood. The MC then comments that he was dead and, in his past life, it was Joseph who took the initiative to share food with others, but he was also killed by a white-skinned creature. He thinks, good people never get a happy ending in this world. However, when the MC puts his hand on Joseph, the latter grabs his hand, which leaves him in shock, as he believed that Joseph was dead. The MC then tells the boy that Joseph wasn't dead yet and that he owed him one. The little girl approaches Dr. Zoe and asks if she was a doctor. The girl mentions that her mother said that doctors wore white clothes with a red cross on them, and that the doctor's clothes had exactly that cross on them. The girl then asks if she could help old Joseph. Dr. Zoe replies that she would make an exception that day, and that she would charge absolutely nothing for it. She asks Joseph what happened to put him in that state, and he replies that it's a long story. Joseph tells her that, after leaving the boiler room, his plan was to go to the security room, but the second floor was completely overrun by monsters. He ended up climbing the emergency stairs and met other survivors on the way. As the monsters kept coming, his only option was to keep climbing. That's when Luda Long appeared, killing some survivors to distract the Whiteskins. Joseph, furious, asks what that bastard was doing. Luda Long replies that he was using the weak to buy time, and starts shooting other people. He says, the strong prevail over the weak. God laid down those rules when he created the world. He then shoots Joseph in the chest and continues to climb. Joseph lay there, bleeding to death. Dr. Zoe comments that Joseph was lucky because the bullet didn't hit any vital points, but he had lost a lot of blood and needed to get to safety immediately. The MC, visibly irritated, walks away. Full of anger at Luda Long, Joseph asks where he was going, but the MC, overcome with rage, doesn't answer. The scene switches to Luda Long, who is still shooting at humans, calling them weak meat. After killing everyone, he comments that that old warehouse would be the safest place in the building, and that he expected to find plenty of supplies inside. However, when he opens the door, he finds the MC, who says, "Here we are again, aren't we, Luda Long?" Luda Long, surprised, asked if the MC wasn't dead and started firing in his direction. However, the MC had already activated his acceleration, dodging all the shots. He then kicks Luda Long in the leg and rips off one of his arms with his hands. The MC holds Luda Long's head, who asks him why he was doing that, claiming he hadn't done anything to him. The MC, furious, replies, "That was nothing?" He goes on to say that, since he came back to life, he hasn't sought revenge, but has tried to create a safe place for himself and the others. Now, looking back, he realizes that it was a stupid choice, since many innocent people died in the process. Filled with rage, the MC activates his power and chars Luda Long's body, throwing it off the building. He says, "If you do anything wrong again, I will do the same to you, 100 times over, because this is the law of the ice world, and here there is no mercy." The scene shifts to Dr. Zoe, who comments that that place seemed to be the storage room that the liquidator used, and that it could be useful for all of them, since there were still some supplies there. She watches the MC in a corner, depressed, thinking that he had finally gotten his revenge by killing Luda Long, who had killed him in his past life, but still not feeling that it was enough. Suddenly, Dr. Zoe slaps him on the head and asks him what he was thinking at a time like that. She sits down next to him and comments that she already suspected he had a problem with Luda Long, and that it's common for people with great powers to act compulsively. However, in the MC's case, the situation was different. The MC thanks her for helping him get rid of that bastard, and the doctor asks if he had a problem with Luda Long. The MC begins to have some dark thoughts, imagining himself pointing a gun at a woman's head. Apparently, someone was watching from the sidelines, and he realizes that the person was very uncomfortable with the scene. He then tells her that she doesn't have to answer if she doesn't want to. He comments that as long as they stayed there, they would be safe, but the heater in that place didn't work as it was used as a storage room. Looking around, the MC realized that things were intact, but Joseph was seriously injured, and Meg was just a child. They couldn't rely on the fire in the barrel forever, especially with the whitecoats outside posing a great danger. They needed to reinforce the site security, and the materials available in the warehouse could be used for this. However, everyone there still needed warmth. The MC then suggested that it would be necessary to go to the power room. Joseph, worried, mentioned that the building was full of monsters, and if they didn't do something, everyone would die. At that moment, Meg sneezes, and the MC comments that if they stayed there, they would freeze to death. Joseph said that there was only one way to resolve the situation. The scene changes, and the MC is walking down the garbage chute, wondering if he really needed to go through there. Suddenly, he is struck by something in front of him, white fur roots. He wonders if the bastards were nesting there. In the middle of his thoughts, he hears a noise and wonders if it's a white fur approaching. However, Dr. Zoe appears unexpectedly and falls on him in a suggestive position. She covers the MC's mouth to prevent him from making a noise and attracting the whitecoats. The MC, confused, asked what she was doing there. She replied that she needed 2 people to operate in the energy room and asked him if he had forgotten that. She also mentions that his body was weak and that if he fainted there, he would surely die. Suddenly, a gigantic white-skinned creature runs past them, almost discovering them. The MC is shocked by how different that white fur is from the others and realizes that, in that state, it would be impossible to defeat it. According to Dr. Zoe, these whiteskins not only ate people, but also sucked their blood, storing it in their veins. The MC wonders where all that blood was going. The scene switches to Meg, who is looking out of the window. She asks Joseph what it was. When Joseph looks, he is horrified to see that white roots were completely surrounding the building, and a bizarre creature was sitting on the ground. The scene changes again, now to Kurt Cobain. He asks a woman if the creature wasn't dead. She replied that she didn't know, but believed that the creature wouldn't attack anymore. Kurt asks if that was some kind of Morse code. The woman, confused, asks what he means by that. Kurt explains that Morse code is a sign language that can be used to form letters and numbers, depending on the pattern. The person responsible for sending the Morse code was Joseph, who was trying to communicate that no one should enter that building. The girl asks Kurt if he was sure they should follow Joseph's instructions. Kurt, confused, replies that he only understood part of the message and believes that Joseph was asking them to enter the building. He insists that he was sure of this, especially as his daughter was on the premises. Meanwhile, Joseph, desperate, tried to warn them not to enter. The scene returns to the MC and Dr. Zoe. He thought the situation was a real mess and that they needed to keep going, but the giant white skin was blocking the way. The MC knew he had no choice. He would have to fight it. However, an unexpected noise attracts the white skin, and it moves away, giving the MC and Zoe a chance to advance. Zoe observes the veins on the ground and comments that they were connected to the corpses they had seen earlier. The MC agrees, mentioning that it was bizarre how the whitecoats used humans to make their nests. Suddenly, a grotesque creature emerges from the whitecoat's body, pulling a gigantic sword from its entrails. The MC feels a strange sensation and, on looking back, realizes that the creature was about to attack Dr. Zoe. In a desperate act, he activates his ability, slowing down time and jumping in front of her to save her. However, the creature hits him square in the back. The MC comments that the creature was much faster and stronger than any other white skin he had ever faced. Suddenly, that white skin turns to Zu, and the MC is outraged to realize that his real target was Zu. Without thinking twice, the white skin moves towards her, but Lin-mo pushes her again, and once again that white skin ends up hitting her chest. He then comments that the creature was very fast, and it would be difficult to withstand its attacks. If it continued like this, he and the doctor would probably die in that place. He begins to wonder, will he die again in this world? Suddenly, the creature inside him tells him to run away, saying that this is what humans do in these situations. They run away. It says that in this icy world, there is no mercy, everyone is equal. If he abandoned his wife, he might survive. However, Lin-mo replies that there's no way he'll run away. If he did that now, what would be the difference between him and Lu DeLong? He says, I can't stop, and that doesn't mean I have to abandon my humanity to survive. The creature remains silent, and Lin-mo continues, saying that when innocent people die, he feels pain in his chest, a suffocating feeling. This pain, he explains, is proof that he is still human. He compares it to the fossils of his ancestors, which, with fractures, show that, even in primitive times, companions didn't abandon each other. Thousands of years have passed, and many humans are still like that. If I have all this power now, I'm going to use it to protect others. Suddenly, tentacles began to emerge from Lin-mo's back, right on the wound the creature had made. However, the white skin still tries to attack them. Just as the white skin launches an attack on the doctor, something protects her. A creature very similar to the white skin, but which was actually Lin-mo in a new transformation. He says that with this new power, he will protect everyone. Despite his similar appearance to the white skin, Lin-mo says that he is definitely not like them. The creature inside him says that this is all very interesting and that he was right to choose it as his host. Now, Lin-mo is able to feel the essence of this power. He prepares to attack the white skin, but the latter manages to block and dodge a few blows. Lin-mo realizes that, although he is faster, his speed is still not enough to defeat the enemy. In the background, Zu observes the changes in him, wondering about the essence of this new power, which seemed to absorb energy from the environment. Even with all this power, Lin-mo still has trouble facing the white skin. The two begin an even fight, and Lin-mo thinks, if he can speed up time, can he also do the opposite? Suddenly, the white skin dodges his attacks and sets off again towards Zu. Just as the white-skinned man's blade is about to hit her head, time apparently stops and Lin-mo says, it finally worked. It was the chance to finish him off with a single blow. Lin-mo uses his shadow blow, hitting the white skin squarely, causing it to explode completely. Zu falls to the ground, and Lin-mo reaches out to help her, saying that they couldn't stay there. Meanwhile, in the room where Joseph and Meiji were, the temperature was 26 degrees Celsius, and Meiji happily commented that everything seemed to be going well, as it was very warm. However, she was sad that she couldn't see her mother. Suddenly, they start to hear strange noises, and Joseph wonders what's going on, wondering if it could be a white skin approaching. The door then opens, revealing Lin-mo, who says they're back. Joseph is very happy to see them back. Lin-mo asks what was happening to Joseph, why he was like that. Dr. Zu asks him not to fuss, as Joseph's wound could open up again and she would have to stitch him up. Joseph comments that he heard a strange noise coming from the heaters and that it could be a white skin. Lin-mo asks if he really heard something, and Joseph replies that it could just be the aging ducks. Lin-mo then asks Joseph not to worry for nothing. It was probably just an illusion, since all the white skins were concentrated on the lower floors. Suddenly, one of the ducks fell to the ground, and in the middle of the ducks there was a shadow. Everyone became alert, and Joseph said he had heard something. Lin-mo, indignant, wonders if they haven't turned into blood nests. Suddenly, Meg recognized the figure in the shadow. It was her mother. Kurt then comments that it was a heating duct and that it was extremely hot, he could hardly stand it. Meg's mother asked her what she was doing there. Meg replies that a very white and strange dog had broken into her house, and a blonde man had attacked her uncles. Uncle Josh saved her, but was injured by the blonde man. Meg asked her other uncle and her red-haired neighbor to help her save Joseph. Joseph, impressed by Meg's memory, praises the girl. Suddenly, Kurt says he misses Lin-mo very much, calling him a stinking brat, and runs to hug him. He jumps towards him, crying, saying that he came on foot from Ariden and crossed the whole continent. Linemo, out of patience, punches Kurt in the face, telling him not to touch him, and wonders who this guy was who looked so familiar. Kurt then comments that even his father hadn't hit him like that and wonders how Linemo could do it. Linemo wonders if Kurt is also from this timeline, like Dr. Zhu, and seems to have known Kurt for a long time, but didn't remember having a friend from Abdon. He begins to wonder if, when he was resurrected, not only the future but also the past was altered. Kurt holds Linmo's arm, saying that they were going to start a band and that they had agreed that he would be Slash's right hand and Kurt would be Hendrix's left hand. Linemo, confused, wonders when he said that and who the hell this blonde freak was. He thinks that the differences from the previous timeline could be explained by the butterfly effect. The future has been altered, but how do you explain someone related to your past? He then decides that he needs to ask the parasitic creature inside him, and calls it, saying that he has some questions. However, no one answers and Linemo thinks that, before, it always appeared on its own, but now, when he looks for it, it doesn't answer. He concludes that this creature really was selfish. Zhu then interrupted, saying that this was not the time to remember the past. Linemo replies that he's not remembering anything, since he doesn't even know that guy. Kurt, hurt, says that he came all this way just for Linemo to make fun of him. Zhu then explains that the heating problem has been solved, but that now there was an even more serious problem. The whitecoats seemed to be the children of a gigantic creature outside, and the blood nests were sending blood to it. She explains that, according to what they've seen down there, the building will be completely assimilated sooner or later. If they ignore what's happening, when the blood nests reach them, they'll have to face the white skins, like the one who pulled a sword out of his gut. Linemo, enthusiastic, says that with his new power he could beat them easily. But Zhu warns him that it's not that simple. She explains that his indicator light was constantly blue, and, after using the king, it got even brighter. Linemo asks what she meant by king, and she was referring to that black form he took. He also asked if using the king consumed a lot of heat, and Zhu confirmed that it did. Activating this state required a great deal of heat, and the heat available now might not be enough to use it again. What's more, he was the only one there capable of taking on the mutant whiteskins, so the situation was serious. She concludes that if Linemo really wanted to survive and use that power again, he would need a lot of heat. Linemo then says she has an idea and asks the doctor if there are any boards left. She asks why, and Linemo replies that she's going to borrow Joseph's sacred sword. He says that no matter how many blood nests or white-skinned threats there are out there, the main conflict is just one. As the saying goes, hunger is the best seasoning, and those who don't eat don't have the strength to work. Dr. Zhu, surprised, replied that his reasoning was unique, and asked if he really wanted to farm there. Linmo then talks about the value of honest workers and that solving the food problem was a priority, as more and more people were joining them. He reflects on how well he knows what hunger is, since he basically died in his past life because of it. Zhu asks Linmo what the next step would be, since the empty hydroponic system won't produce food out of thin air. Linmo goes outside and notices that, as expected, the bodies on the floor have disappeared, leaving not a drop of blood behind. He concludes that something was collecting the bodies, probably the giant white fur they saw earlier. This meant that, before long, the blood nests would reach that floor. He needed to act quickly, as he intended to use his black form to completely eliminate the source of the threat. In addition, he needed to solve the problem of heat and food. Suddenly, Kurt appears and hugs him, asking where he was going alone. Linemo, annoyed, asked why he was following him. Kurt replied that he understood his brother, saying that Linemo didn't want to be seen with a friend like him because it was embarrassing. He comments that, now that he works for a big company, he looks like a beggar and wouldn't be welcome there. Linemo just wonders what's wrong with that madman. Kurt then says that since they're alone, they can speak without ceremony. Linemo, covering her ears because she finds Kurt so annoying, is suddenly shocked to see the giant white skin appear right in front of them. The scene switches to a flashback where Kurt was talking to a certain Jerry, saying that the two of them looked alike and that, since they had been expelled, they could only hide under a bridge. From that moment on, they would depend on each other. A little mouse was leaving, and Kurt commented that if he didn't want to, he didn't have to go. Besides, it was raining too much. Suddenly, a boy appears behind Kurt and comments that he knew he'd be in that place, because every time he's kicked out of the house he hides under that bridge. The boy asks how many times Kurt's father has hit him. Kurt, annoyed, asks if he just came to tease him. The The boy, Lin-mo, replies that he wasn't teasing and that hiding under a bridge was pathetic. If they were going to run away for real, they'd have to do it in style. Kurt asks where Lin-mo learned those cliched phrases, and Lin-mo says that if they're going to run away, they need to do it with a good friend to be stylish. Kurt comments that only Lin-mo could say something like that, and Lin-mo thanks him for the compliment. Back in the present, Lin-mo holds Kurt by the neck and asks him what he was thinking, saying that they needed to run. Lin-mo comments that the blood nests have already spread to the 4th floor, and that he needed to go back to get the seeds. Kurt, recalling what Lin-mo said when they were kids, says that he always said that if they were going to run away, it had to be in style. Lin-mo, annoyed, asks if Kurt was still talking that nonsense, and Kurt replies that it was Lin-mo who said it. Lin-mo, furious, claims that he never said that. The two start arguing in the midst of the danger, when suddenly the wall starts to break and a gigantic hand grabs Lin-mo's head. Lin-mo thought it was too late and that his head would be crushed, but suddenly Kurt threw a Molotov cocktail at the giant white fur, which started to catch fire. The creature throws Lin-mo away, and he ends up falling into a nest of blood. He realizes that he is being absorbed by the nest and tries to escape, but his body is already completely trapped. His eyes begin to close and he thinks that his life will end that way. Suddenly, Lin-mo opens his eyes and finds himself in a completely different place, like a jail. Very confused, he wonders where he is. He sees a woman tied to some vines and wonders if she is a white skin or a human. The woman opened her eyes, revealing that she was still alive, but in the blink of an eye, Lin-mo was transported to another scene. He finds himself back in a flashback to his childhood, when he was with Kurt. He recognizes the blonde boy and remembers that he was a busybody from Abdon. Lin-mo wonders who the blonde boy was talking to, and when he looks, he realizes that the boy was himself. He begins to wonder if that memory was true and if they really were friends. Suddenly, the child version of Lin-mo shakes his hand and says that the blonde boy wasn't Kurt Cobain, but a friend of his, and not the adult Lin-mo. The boy then calls the adult Lin-mo a thief. Suddenly, Lin-mo opens his eyes and realizes that Kurt is pulling on his arm, saying that it would be very pathetic if he died like that. Kurt manages to save Lin-mo from the blood nest and asks if he's okay. Lin-mo replies that he almost became food for the nest, but wonders if it was real or just a dream. He decides to put it to one side, as it wasn't the time to think about it. Now he had to figure out what to do about the giant whitecoat that was still threatening them, since the creature seemed to have no fear of fire. Kurt comments that the giant was very tough and says he's going to offer him another drink. Lin-mo interrupts, asking Kurt not to act so quickly. He explains that the fat of those creatures burns quickly at high temperatures, but that beings seemed to be absorbing the flames and heat. In addition, his regeneration was very high, and Lin-mo fears that incendiary bombs would not be enough to eliminate him. Kurt, completely disregarding Lin-mo's analysis, replies that he's going to burn him until he can no longer regenerate. Lin-mo, furious, asks if Kurt was listening to what he had just said or if he was a complete idiot. Even so, Kurt throws another Molotov cocktail at the white skin, and this time the creature doesn't try to dodge it. Lin-mo realizes that he may have to use his black form again, since he can't let the white skin continue destroying the building. However, when he tries to activate the power, nothing happens. He remembers what the doctor had said. He didn't have enough heat to transform. Now he really wouldn't have the power to fight the giant. Just then, an idea popped into his head. From the start, the white skin looked vaguely familiar, and he realized that the creature could absorb heat, just as it did in its blue state. The doctor had also mentioned that, in this state, it absorbed heat from its surroundings. This observation gives him a new strategy, and he believes that this method could work. However, before Lin-mo could test his idea, the white skin was ready to attack. The creature landed a powerful punch on the ground, throwing stones everywhere. And that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to become a member of the channel. It helps us a lot, and subscribe. See you later.